Hey guys, so in this video we're looking at the first of the three-term factoring problems. Our first step, as always, is going to be to look for a GCF. I can't overemphasize how important it is that you get the GCF out of your way if there is one present. I'll do some examples with that. So once you get the GCF out of the way, you count the terms. And for these ones, we would have three terms, so we're over on this row. And then the first question is the leading coefficient 1? And that's going to be this style. So these are the ones we're looking at in 5.2. So it'll be three terms, and once we get the GCF out of the way, it's going to be like a plain x squared in front. So that's going to be this style, and this is going to be our approach for all of these. So here we go. These first ones, no GCFs to start off. We'll add those in later. The deal with this is it's basically a reverse FOIL. So if you think about when you FOIL something, it kind of looks like this. It has x's up front. And if you think about what the last terms do, we go this times this, and they make the number on the end. And so that's going to hold true with these problems where we go what multiplies to be the end. The second piece is what multiplies to be the end adds to be the middle. And I think, let me just make one up here. So let's say we had x plus 2 and x plus 4, just for instance. X times x, this is kind of our FOIL, x squared. On the outside we have a 4x, on the inside a 2x, and then on the end an 8. And if you look, this would make 6x, right? And so these numbers, what they end up being is what multiplies to be the end, and then they have to add, because that's what's going to happen with the cross terms, but they have to add to be the middle number. So here I'd be saying, if I had this, what multiplies to 8 and adds to be 6, 2 and 4, so that's how I'd find my numbers. So with this one, what multiplies to be 35 and adds to be 12 would be 5 and 7. And if you FOIL that back out, you'll get your x squared plus 7x plus 5x, that makes the 12x, and then the 35 on the end. The FOIL is always the check on these, but you don't have to FOIL. This would be the answer. Also, it doesn't matter if I put the 7 first or the 5 first, it's the exact same thing either way. So this one, so they're all going to kind of do this thing where we set up the parentheses. That's kind of going to be our start on these. We're asking what multiplies to be 30 and adds to be negative 17. So if you have a hard time spotting the numbers, you can always make a list. Hopefully you find it without the list, but you can always go 1 and 30, 2 and 15, that's going to end up being the right one, 3 and 10, 4 doesn't work, 5 and 6, and next one would be 6, so I'd be just repeating that same cycle. And then if we look at which of these adds to be 17, I can see if I make negative 7, negative 15, they multiply to be positive 30 and add to be negative 17. And so right there's something we can kind of pick up from how the signs work on these. If the end is positive, I'm either going to have 2 positives or 2 negatives. And we can tell from the middle term. If the middle term's positive, I had 2 positive. If the middle term's negative, then I had to have 2 negatives for it to multiply to be a positive. The next two are the ones with the mixed signs. So x, x, and we're asking what multiplies to be negative 28 and adds to be 12. So if I made the list, again, you don't need to make the list if you can see it, but this is just kind of getting introduced. I'd have 1 and 28, 2 and 14, 3 doesn't work, 4 and 7, and that's my last one. So none of these add, strictly speaking, to be 12. 1 and 28 would be 29, this would be 16, this would be 11. But that's because we're not paying attention to the signs. It wasn't a 28, it's actually a negative 28, which means one of those has to be a negative. So when we have a negative on the end, it's probably better to think of it as the space between the numbers rather than the sum of the numbers. And the reason is one of those numbers is going to be a negative. In this case, it'll be negative 2, positive 12, or positive 14. We'll add to 12. But one will be negative, one will be positive. And so it's the space between, it's when you subtract, is what you're looking for the ones that end in negative. So this will be a minus 2 and a plus 14. This one with the 30, so I'd be looking for numbers that are 1 apart, because that's a little invisible 1 there. And so x and then minus 6 and x plus 5. So this would be 1 apart, and they add to negative 1. So then notice the ones with the negatives on the ends, we're going to have both a positive and a negative in both cases. And then if the middle number is positive, our big number is positive. If the middle number is negative, then our big number would be the negative one. So that's kind of how the signs work. You don't have to have all that memorized, but it just sort of helps if you can kind of think through it that way. It eliminates some choices when trying to figure out what the numbers are. So these are the matched ones that I have you guys try in class. So for all of them, we'll just kind of set up our parentheses and then go what multiplies to 24 and adds to be 11. So that would be positive 3 and positive 8 multiplies to 24 and then adds to be the 11. For this one, 60 and multiplies to be a positive 60 but adds to be a negative, so I know it's two negative numbers. That's one where it's maybe a little bit hard to spot, so you might try the list. So 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, so you can see we're kind of getting closer. Is 61, 32, 23, 4 and 15, so there's our 2. So minus 4 and minus 15. This one, so we got multiplies to a negative, so that means I have mixed signs, and adds to be a positive, so that means my big number is going to be the positive one, and that looks like it'd be 8 and negative 4 multiplies to negative 32, adds to be 4. Here, same thing with the x's, multiplies to negative 70, adds to be negative 3, so that sounds like negative 10 and positive 7. Again, notice the big number is negative because the middle is negative. These next couple would be me, so one with a GCF, one with kind of an extra letter running around, just to kind of show how that would work. So when you have a GCF, don't try to factor the whole thing at once. People try to they'll look at this and go 3, 12, 63, so I can take out a 3. It looks like we can do an X everywhere. And then they'll try to go straight to the factored answer, and that's super hard to do. That's hard for me to do. So instead, don't do that. Just do the GCF step as its own thing. And then 3 would go into that one 21 times. And then you can actually see what you have here, and that's going to help you not, even if you can kind of halfway do it in your head, it's really easy to mix up signs and stuff when you're trying to do too much just in one step. So now that I can see what I got, then I can go, okay, plus 7 and a minus 3 gets me negative 21, adds to the 4. Here, the extra letters make this look really complicated, but it's actually not at all complicated. We would still just do what multiplies to 54 and adds to be negative 15. So we know we have two negatives because they multiply to a positive, add to be a negative. It sounds like it'd be negative 6 and negative 9. And so then the only difference is for that r squared, they just need r's on the end. And you can see I'm going to get positive 54 r squared. On the outside, I'll get 9xr. Inside, I'll get 6xr. And they'll make that 15xr. So just when you have this, it just means you need those is all. And then these last 6 are the ones I would have you guys try. So lots of GCFs, lots of little variations here. Let's see, 6, 42, 36, looks like I take out a 6. So I'll leave x squared plus 7x plus 6. And then we need two numbers to multiply to 6 and add to be 7, so it must be plus 1 and plus 6. Adds to 7, multiplies to 6. Here we're going to have a GCF of 5, and then x squared is our smallest power, so that's as much as we can take out. So x squared left there, minus 13x, and 5 goes into 240 times. So 5x squared, x, so multiplies to 40 and adds to be negative 13, so two negatives, and it'll be 5 and 8. Let's see, so this one we could do a 4 out front. It's going to leave x squared plus 9x plus 20. Multiplies 20, adds to be 9, so x plus 4 and x plus 5. Over here, I could do a 3x. So that'll leave me x squared minus 12x and plus 11. So adds to negative 12, multiplies to 11, so it must be 1 and 11, both negative. Here, it looks like just an x squared everywhere, so we'll get that out of the way. And I think it's the one I actually just did. We're pretty close to it. So it's another 54 and 15. And so let's see, that's gonna be 6 and 9 again. And then this one, we need it to multiply to 90 and add to be 1. So, and it's a negative 90, so it's going to be a 10 and a 9. And our 9 is going to be our negative, so it stays a positive 1. So, and it has that extra letter, so that'll look like x plus 10r, and then x minus 9r.